Sophia sat quietly at the worn wooden table, a faint smell of dust hanging in the air. The house around her was eerily still, the only sound the soft tapping of rain against the windows. She was at her grandparents' old house, a place that always felt like stepping into another world. The house, with its faded wallpaper and creaky floorboards, had a strange way of holding on to the past. It was a treasure trove of memories, and Sophia had come here to find something valuable for her history project. She had been going through boxes in the attic when she found it, an old neglected radio. It looked out of place in the modern world, with its brass dials and dusty wood casing. Curiosity piqued, she dusted it off and placed it on the table, wondering if it still worked. There was something about the radio that seemed familiar, like it had stories to tell. Sophia had always been fascinated by vintage items, but something about this particular radio tugged at her in a way she couldn't quite explain. "Let's see if this still works," she muttered to herself, turning the dial. She twisted the knob carefully, the static hissing louder with each turn. She adjusted the antenna, then flicked the power switch. For a moment, nothing happened, just the static white noise filling the room. But then, something shifted. A voice, faint and distant, cut through the static. "I am here." Sophia froze. Her fingers hovered over the dial, unsure whether she had imagined the words or if they were real. She leaned in closer to the radio, her heart beating faster. The voice was clearer now, almost soothing, yet undeniably unsettling. "I am here." She glanced around the room, but there was no one else there. It was just her and the strange voice on the radio. Was it a prank? Had someone hidden a speaker somewhere? But there was no way this was an old, broken radio, the kind her grandfather used to collect. Sophia reached out slowly, turning the volume up just a little. The voice spoke again, this time more distinctly. "I am lost." Her breath caught in her throat. The words sent a chill down her spine. What was going on? She quickly turned the dial, hoping to silence the voice, but the static continued, now louder, as if mocking her. And then, before she could react, the voice spoke once more, almost like it was waiting for her to respond. "I am lost?" Sophia's fingers trembled as she stared at the radio. She felt an unease in her chest, but curiosity overpowered her fear. She couldn't help but wonder, who was speaking? And how could this old radio be connected to a voice from the past, or perhaps something even more inexplicable? Sophia sat back, her mind racing as the faint voice continued to echo in her ears. She was no longer just intrigued, she was captivated. What kind of trick was this? The voice seemed to know something about her, something that made her feel as though she wasn't alone in the room, even though she clearly was. She hesitated for a moment, then leaned forward, adjusting the radio once more. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. There was a long pause. The static seemed to increase in intensity before the voice responded, clear but distant, almost too calm. "Who are you?" it asked back. Sophia's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure what to make of it, but there was a strange connection forming. Something she couldn't explain. Was this some kind of prank? A recording? Number? It didn't feel like one. The voice didn't sound like a person trying to trick her. It sounded real. "I'm Sophia," she said softly, almost as if talking to herself. "What do you want?" Her voice wavered, uncertainty creeping in. The voice paused again before answering in a whisper that sent a shiver down her spine. "I am lost." The words were simple, but there was something haunting about them. Sophia felt an involuntary chill run through her. She felt like she was being drawn into something she didn't fully understand. She gripped the edges of the table, trying to steady herself. This couldn't be happening. It didn't make sense. It was just an old radio. "You're lost?" she asked cautiously. "What do you mean?" The radio crackled, the static swelling for a brief moment before the voice returned, softer this time, like a breath escaping into the silence. "I am here, waiting." Sophia frowned. There was something about that statement that unsettled her. It was like the voice wasn't just waiting for her to respond. It was waiting for something else, something beyond her understanding. "Where are you?" Sophia asked, her curiosity pushing her to probe deeper. The voice didn't respond immediately, and Sophia's eyes darted nervously around the room. The house felt colder now, the air thick with an unnatural stillness. She felt a tension building in the space around her, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Finally, the voice spoke again, almost in a whisper. "I am lost in the dark." The words hung in the air, heavy and strange. Sophia didn't know what to make of it, but something inside her felt compelled to continue. She stared at the radio, waiting for more. She was scared, yes, but she was also fascinated. There was a story here, a mystery that demanded to be unraveled. She had to know more. "Why are you talking to me?" Sophia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. This time there was no immediate response. The static filled the room once again, louder this time, drowning out her thoughts. She waited, every nerve on edge. Was this a game? A joke? Was she really just talking to a broken radio? Or was something much stranger at play? "I am here," the voice said, finally, with a calm certainty that sent a chill down her spine. "And you are here too." Sophia's fingers hovered over the dial, her mind spinning with questions. She had expected something more tangible, more explainable. But this was something else entirely. As the voice on the radio continued to speak in that calm, almost soothing tone, she couldn't shake the feeling that it was something beyond the ordinary. Her heart raced as she struggled to understand what was happening. "I am here," the voice repeated, its tone now becoming more insistent. "And you are here too." "What do you mean?" Sophia asked, the fear in her voice unmistakable. She had to know more. The curiosity gnawed at her, louder than the unease growing inside her. "What do you want from me?" For a moment there was only the sound of static. Then the voice came back, softer this time, like a whisper. "To find you, and to find me." Sophia felt a chill sweep over her. She had heard those words before, echoes of things that didn't make sense, things that didn't belong, but now they felt like a warning of something she wasn't prepared for. She wasn't sure if she should turn off the radio and walk away, or if she should press on and discover what was truly going on. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice a mix of fear and fascination. "Tell me who you are." The silence stretched on longer than it ever had before. The static buzzed in the background, almost mocking her patience. Was the voice gone? Had she imagined the whole thing? She started to pull her hand away from the radio, but then, "I am lost," the voice whispered again. Sophia gasped, as though the words themselves had reached into her chest and gripped her heart. She wasn't sure why, but she suddenly felt connected to whatever this voice was. The words were so simple, but they felt like a cry for help. It didn't make sense, and yet it felt too real to ignore. "What do you mean? What do you want me to do?" Sophia asked, almost pleading. "Where are you?" Again, the silence stretched on. But this time, when the voice responded, it wasn't just words, it was a feeling, something she could sense deep within herself, like an echo in her mind. "I am here." In the dark, The voice murmured, "I have always been here, waiting." Sophia's pulse quickened. She didn't understand. She didn't know what to believe, but there was something undeniably eerie about this voice, something that felt so much like a call from the past, or perhaps from a place beyond her comprehension. "What is this?" Sophia asked, the question slipping from her lips before she could stop herself. "Why is this happening?" The static seemed to grow louder, as if the radio itself was struggling to hold on to its secret. But then the voice returned, quieter now, more distant, yet still clear. "I have seen you, Sophia. I have watched you." Sophia's breath caught in her throat. Her name. The voice knew her name. How could that be? She hadn't said anything about herself to the radio, had she? Could this be a coincidence? Or something far more terrifying? The radio crackled again, the static enveloping the room. Sophia was frozen, her mind racing as she tried to comprehend what was happening. She could feel the tension building, a pressure in the air, as though the room itself was holding its breath. "You cannot escape me," the voice whispered, and for the first time, Sophia felt the weight of those words, the deep, dark truth behind them. Sophia stood up quickly, the radio in front of her now seeming like an enemy rather than an object of curiosity. Her mind raced, her thoughts tangled in a web of disbelief and fear. The voice, whatever it was, had just spoken her name. It knew things about her that no one could know, things she hadn't shared with anyone. "How do you know my name?" Sophia whispered to the radio, her voice barely audible as the question hung in the air. The static buzzed louder in response, almost like a laugh. Then the voice returned, this time without hesitation. "I have always known you, Sophia. I have watched you." The words felt like an intrusion, like something that shouldn't be possible. Sophia recoiled, her mind struggling to catch up to the strange reality unfolding around her. Was this a dream? Was she losing her mind? "I don't understand," she muttered to herself, pacing back and forth across the room. The tension was unbearable now. The air felt thick, as if the walls themselves were pressing in on her. She tried to turn the radio off again, but when she reached for the dial, it wouldn't budge. The radio remained on, as if it had a life of its own. "Stop," she begged, her hand shaking as she held it out towards the radio. "Please stop." But the voice didn't stop. It only grew clearer. "I am in the dark," it said, its tone now laced with something more intense, more desperate, "and you are here with me." Sophia felt a cold rush of dread fill her chest. She wanted to shut the radio off, to escape this strange, unnerving connection, but something held her there, something she couldn't explain. There was a pull, a force, like the voice was anchoring her to this moment, to this room. "What do you want from me?" Sophia's voice broke through the silence, sounding almost frantic. "Why are you talking to me?" The static filled the room once again, this time not in the background, but right in front of her, as if the radio itself was breathing. She took a step back, instinctively trying to distance herself from the ominous presence that now seemed to surround her. "I want to be found," the voice whispered, its words barely audible over the crackling static. "I want you to help me." The weight of those words hit Sophia harder than she expected. Help? Help with what? She was about to say something more when the radio suddenly emitted a loud screech. The static now so sharp it almost hurt her ears. She slammed her hands over her ears, but the sound continued. And then, just as suddenly, the radio went silent. Sophia stood frozen, her body tense with anticipation, unsure whether the silence was a blessing or a curse. Had the voice gone away? Was it over? She cautiously removed her hands from her ears and glanced at the radio, the dim glow of the dial, the only light in the room. "Are you still there?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling. The answer came not through words, but through the faintest crackle in the air. Sophia could feel it. Something was there. Something was watching her. "I am here," the voice responded, its tone almost pleading. "I have always been here, and I am waiting." Sophia's heart skipped a beat as the air seemed to grow colder. The voice wasn't just talking to her, it was calling to her. She felt the darkness it spoke of creeping into her own world, as if the boundary between what was real and what wasn't had blurred beyond recognition. "I'm here," Sophia said, almost as if she was accepting her role in this strange conversation. "But I don't know how to help you." The radio hissed softly, as if considering her words. Then a new voice, a second, fainter voice spoke, but this time it wasn't in English. "Find me?" The words were indistinct, whispered in a language Sophia didn't recognize. The static surged again, louder than before. Sophia gasped, her chest tightening. The voice was changing. The air around her seemed to thicken, and she felt herself being drawn deeper into whatever was unfolding. "I don't know what to do," she whispered to the radio, feeling helpless. But the answer came again, clear and unmistakable. "Help me," the voice said. "Find me in the dark." Sophia's hand trembled as she reached for the radio again. The room felt colder than before, and the dim light from the dial seemed to flicker, as though it were alive in a way she couldn't explain. The voice on the radio, now clearer than ever, had taken on a desperate tone, and every word it spoke felt like an unraveling of reality itself. "Help me," it whispered once more. "Find me in the dark." Sophia's breath caught in her throat. She had tried to ignore the pull of this voice, to walk away and pretend nothing had happened. But now she realized she couldn't. Whatever this was, whatever connection she had formed with the voice, it was something she couldn't shake off. The voice was not just calling out to her, it was beckoning her into something she wasn't prepared for. Her heart pounded in her chest as she closed her eyes for a moment, trying to center herself. The static around her swelled like a force she couldn't control. The more she resisted, the more the feeling of being watched intensified. She could feel the darkness growing around her, seeping into the corners of the room like a shadow stretching across her mind. "What are you?" Sophia whispered, her voice shaking with both fear and curiosity. "Why are you asking me to help you?" The radio crackled, then fell silent. Sophia waited, her pulse racing as the room seemed to grow even colder. And then there it was, a new voice, faint and distant, speaking in the same language Sophia couldn't understand. She strained to listen, but it was as if the voice was being drowned by the static, distorted and fading in and out. "Find me," the voice pleaded again, its tone now urgent, almost frantic. "You must find me in the dark." Sophia felt the walls close in around her, the shadows lengthening as if to swallow her whole. It wasn't just the voice anymore. It was the very air, heavy with a presence that made her feel small and powerless. Her skin prickled with a sense of dread she couldn't escape. She had to make a choice: leave this place, walk away from the radio and pretend nothing had happened, or give in to the pull of the voice and follow it into whatever dark place it was calling from. Torn between fear and an overwhelming need to understand, Sophia finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "How can I help you?" she asked, dreading the answer but knowing that she had to ask. The radio hummed, the static rising and falling like a heartbeat before the voice returned calm, but somehow colder now. "Find me in the dark. You know where I am." Sophia stood frozen, a cold sweat forming on her brow. What did that mean? She didn't know where to begin. She had never heard of a ghost or whatever this voice was reaching out in such a way. The idea of finding it felt impossible. What was this entity waiting for? Was it trapped in some sort of limbo? And why had it chosen her? For a moment, Sophia's gaze shifted toward the window. The rain had stopped and the house had grown eerily quiet. She could hear the faint sounds of her own breath in the stillness. And yet, in the back of her mind, she heard the voice again, echoing through her thoughts. "I have always been here," it said softly, "and I am waiting for you to help me." The realization hit her like a sudden wave. This wasn't just a strange coincidence. The radio wasn't just a device. It was a bridge connecting her to something that had been waiting in the dark, something desperate, something old. And the connection she had formed wasn't just an accidental encounter. It was the start of something far deeper than she could have ever imagined. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The voice had called to her, and now it was up to her to decide whether to listen and step into the darkness, or turn away and live with the knowledge that she had heard its plea and chosen not to act. The radio clicked off suddenly, the dial going silent. Sophia looked down at it, her breath caught in her throat. It was as if the decision had been made for her. She had no control over what was coming next. But deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. And as the silence in the room thickened, Sophia couldn't help but wonder, what would she do next? Sophia sat in the dark room, her thoughts swirling in confusion and fear. The radio, now silent, sat like an ominous reminder of everything that had just happened. The voice, the eerie words, the chilling connection, it all felt like a dream, or maybe a nightmare. But there was no denying the reality of what she had experienced. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for her, somewhere in the dark. As the moments passed, the silence in the room seemed less like peace and more like a warning. Sophia knew she had made a choice, whether she realized it or not. The radio had spoken to her, and she had listened. But what now? What had all of this meant? Her mind kept returning to the phrases she had heard. "I am here. Who are you? I am lost. Find me in the dark." These simple words had led her down a path she hadn't expected, a path that felt both terrifying and strangely inevitable. In the quiet of the room, Sophia allowed herself a moment of clarity. Despite the terror of the situation, she had learned something valuable. The conversation with the voice, the strange connection to the unknown, had taught her more than she realized. The phrases were simple, but they held deeper meaning, both in the context of her own experience and in the context of learning a new language. For example, the phrase, "I am here," was used in moments of arrival, when she was introducing herself to someone, or even when reassuring others. It was a phrase that showed presence, a simple way to say, "I am with you," or "I am where I need to be." "Who are you?" was another key phrase, one that could be used in many situations: meeting someone new, asking about identity, or even just getting to know someone better. It was a question of curiosity, a way of connecting. And "I am lost," a phrase that could be so much more than just confusion or disorientation. It could be a metaphor for seeking understanding, for trying to find one's way in a complex world. Sometimes we all feel lost, but the important part was asking for help and being willing to seek the answers. Finally, the phrase, "find me in the dark," held a different significance. It wasn't just about literal darkness, but about the unknown, the places we are afraid to go, the questions we don't have answers to, and the mysteries we don't yet understand. It was a call to explore, to face the unknown, and to seek out the truth even when it seemed frightening. Sophia thought about these phrases, about how they had guided her through the strange experience with the radio. She had learned something more than just words. She had learned the power of communication, of asking questions, and of seeking answers, even in the face of fear. "Now I understand," she whispered to herself, a sense of calm settling over her. The darkness wasn't just around her, it was inside her, in the uncertainty, in the things she couldn't explain. But even in that darkness, there was a lesson to be learned. The radio, the voice, the unknown, they had all been a part of her journey. A journey that had started with a simple question and had led her into the heart of a mystery she couldn't ignore. "Thank you," she said softly, her words no longer filled with fear, but with a strange sense of acceptance. "I will find you in the dark."